Deep in the Wexford countryside, surrounded by rolling lawns and shimmering lakes, stands one of Ireland's most romantic castles. This is Johnstown, a place where medieval ruins gave way to Gothic Revival splendour, where Norman roots, Cromwellian wars, and 19th century ambition all left their mark. Today, Johnstown Castle is more than a historic house. It is a story of power, faith, rebellion, and reinvention. At first sight, Johnstown Castle seems like something out of a storybook. Towers reflected in the still waters of its lake, framed by sprawling lawns and woodlands. But behind this beauty lies a story forged in conquest and survival. And to understand it, we must step back to the late 12th century, when the Normans first carved their mark on Wexford.
In 1169, Norman forces landed at Bannow Bay, and they were led by Robert Fitzstephen and Maurice de Prendergast. Soon after, vast tracts of lands were granted to Norman families who had proven their loyalty in battle, and that land was promised to them by Dermot MacMurrough.
Among them were the Esmondes, who took control of Johnstown. Their role was not simply to farm or to settle, it was to defend. These were frontier lands, constantly contested, and the Esmondes were charged with holding them. What they built here was not the fairy tale castle you see today, but a stark tower house. Now imagine thick stone walls rising against the skyline, crowned with battlements and surrounded by a protective bawn wall. Narrow arrow slits offered defence, but admitted little light. The castle was not designed for comfort. It was built to endure raids, sieges, and the uncertainty of living on contested ground. Life inside would have been very harsh. The lower floors stored supplies and usually livestock, while the family lived above, usually in cold, smoky chambers. The air was heavy with peat fires, food was plain, and daily existence was shaped by the constant possibility of attack. This was a castle of survival, not of splendour and comfort. The Gaelic Irish, particularly the Ukinsalig dynasty, resisted Norman encroachment fiercely. Skirmishes and raids defined the landscape for generations. Yet despite this, the Esmondes remained. Over time, they blended into Ireland's fabric, intermarrying with Gaelic families and adopting local customs. And by the 14th century, they were as much Irish as Norman, proof of how conquest eventually became settlement. Even now, you can trace echoes of this first fortress in the very stones of Johnstown. The rougher basework hidden beneath later additions whispers of the original tower house, its walls thick, its defences simple, yet its presence enduring. This was the true beginning of Johnstown Castle, not a place of fairy tales, but a Norman stronghold, born from invasion, hardened by conflict, and destined to evolve into one of Wexford's most enduring symbols of power. By the 16th century, Ireland had changed, and so too had Johnstown. The Esmonde family, who had held it for centuries, found themselves caught in the storm of Tudor expansion and the violent politics of the Elizabethan age. Loyalty was everything, and suspicion of disloyalty could cost the family its lands, its freedom, and even its life.
The Esmondes were steadfast Catholics in an era when England demanded Protestant conformity. This was an extremely dangerous position for the family. While the family clung to their faith, their loyalty to the crown was constantly questioned.
Time and again, the Esmondes were fined, harassed, or stripped of rights. Yet Johnstown remained in their possession, a testament to their resilience and their political manoeuvring. But loyalty came at a cost. In 1641, Ireland erupted into rebellion. The Esmondes sided with the insurgents, fighting to preserve Catholic lands and rights, and Johnstown became more than a home. It was a symbol of defiance. Yet the tides turned brutally. Cromwell's conquest swept through Ireland with unrelenting force, and by the mid-17th century, the Esmondes had lost much of their power, and Johnstown was taken from them by Cromwell in 1649 following the sack of Wexford, though Johnstown Castle itself endured. Cromwell granted the estate to one of his officers, Lieutenant Colonel John Overstreet. Throughout its subsequent history, the estate changed hands a few more times, before being acquired by the Protestant Grogan family in 1692, who then developed the estate into the Gothic Revival style castle and grounds seen here today. It's easy to forget that behind these tranquil walls were centuries of fear and survival. The Esmondes endured confiscations, pardons, and shifting allegiances. The story at Johnstown mirrors that of many old Norman families. Conquerors who became settlers, settlers who became rebels, and rebels who struggled to hold on to what their ancestors had seized with the sword. Johnstown itself, though scarred by conflict, survived. Its stone walls, built in the Norman age, bore witness to the fires of rebellion and the punishments of empire. Families rose and fell, but the castle remained. Each generation added layers of history, scars, repairs, and reinventions that would one day transform it from fortress to fairy tale. By the early 19th century, Johnstown had weathered centuries of upheaval, rebellion, and shifting allegiances. But its greatest transformation was yet to come. When the estate passed into the hands of the Grogan-Morgan family, they envisioned something entirely new. A castle not merely for defence, but for display, comfort, and prestige. This was the age of the Gothic Revival, when the ruins of the medieval world inspired the romantic dreams of the gentry. Under the guidance of the Grogan-Morgans, Johnstown was reshaped in the 1830s and 1840s into the Gothic masterpiece we see today. Tall towers, pointed arches, and elaborate stonework replaced the plain strength of the old Norman fortress. The emphasis was not on defence. Artillery had made castles obsolete, but this was on grandeur. The Morgans wanted their castle to stand as a statement of lineage, wealth, and cultural refinement. Every detail of Johnstown was chosen to impress. The sweeping staircases, the richly carved interiors, the castellated skyline, all were designed to embody the romance of the medieval past while providing the comforts of the modern world. Unlike their Norman ancestors who had built for war, the Grogan-Morgans built for legacy. Their castle was to be admired, not besieged. But the 19th century was not only about architecture. It was about control over the land and people. The Grogan-Morgans presided over vast estates, and the rebuilding of Johnstown was also a declaration of dominance. In an Ireland marked by famine, genocide, poverty, and political unrest, such as displays of wealth were both admired and resented. The castle was a vision of splendour, but also a reminder of inequality.
Johnstown's Gothic revival was not just cosmetic, it was symbolic. It represented the endurance of a Norman family line, reshaped across centuries to fit each new age.
Where once Johnstown had been a fortress of stone and fear, it was now a monument of elegance, designed to stand against the test of time, not through strength, but through beauty. The grandeur of Johnstown Castle does not end with its stone walls. Step beyond the towers, and the landscape itself becomes part of the history, part of the story. It was in the mid-19th century the Grogan-Morgans turned Johnstown into a model Victorian estate, where architecture, gardens, and water blended into one grand vision. 3 man-made lakes were created, carefully designed to catch the sunlight, and reflected the turrets of the castle. They weren't merely ornamental, they were symbols of control over nature, reshaping the land into beauty that proclaimed wealth and refinement. The lakes framed the castle, making it seem as if it floated on a mirror.
Surrounding the water, woodlands were planted with a mixture of Irish and exotic species. This was the Victorian love of the picturesque. What looked natural was carefully planned.
The winding paths encouraged visitors to stroll, to pause at viewpoints, to admire both the hand of nature and the hand of man. Every feature had purpose. The bridges were not simply practical crossings. They were designed as frames, guiding the eye toward the castle rising beyond. Even the smallest details, stone arches, garden walls, hidden benches, played their role in shaping the experience of moving through Johnstown estate itself. But the estate was not all leisure and beauty. It was also a place of work. Tenant farmers and estate workers maintained the grounds, cultivated the fields, and kept the Grogan-Morgan's lifestyle running. For them, Johnstown was not a romantic garden, but a place of labour, a reminder of the deep inequalities of Victorian Ireland. The design of the gardens and lakes, Johnstown became more than just a residence. It became a theatre of power, a stage where the Grogan-Morgans could host guests, display their status, and embody the ideals of Victorian progress. Nature was ordered, disciplined, and transformed into splendour, just as the family hoped their legacy would be remembered. By the dawn of the 20th century, the glory of Johnstown Castle was fading. The Grogan-Morgans, once among the wealthiest in County Wexford, faced mounting financial difficulties. Like many landed families across Ireland, the decline of the landlord system and the sweeping changes brought land reforms began to strip away their fortune. In 1945, Maurice Victor Lacan, the last of the Grogan-Morgan heirs, transferred the castle and the grounds to the state. It was a gesture both practical and symbolic. The old order giving way to a new Ireland. The grounds became home to the Department of Agriculture, which used the estate for research. The castle itself was closed to the public, its doors shut, its rooms falling into silence. For decades, the people of Wexford could only walk the outer gardens, gazing at the towers, but never stepping inside. The castle became a mystery, a silent giant locked away. And it was not until the late 20th century and early 21st century that Johnstown began to stir again. Conservation work driven by the Irish Heritage Trust and Teagasc breathed new life into the estate. The castle's great halls were restored, the lakes and gardens cared for, and finally, the doors opened once more to the public.
What was once an exclusive seat of privilege has now become a shared space of memory, where Ireland's past can be told and retold for generations to come.
Standing here today, Johnstown Castle is more than stone and mortar. It is a living record of Ireland's social and political transformation, from medieval ambition to modern heritage. Every tower, every gate, every carefully tended garden tells a story of families, fortunes, and the changing landscape of the country. As the sun sets and the light softens, the castle takes on a timeless quality. Its history, from Norman ambitions to modern stewardship, is etched into every stone, every reflection, every path. It is a story of adaptation, survival, and reverence. Thanks for joining me on this journey through history. If you enjoyed exploring Johnstown Castle, make sure to hit that subscribe button and hype the episode. If you want to have a say in future episodes, then why not join us on Patreon, where every donation is pumped back into the show. Every donation goes towards the new equipment, such as drones and new cameras, and also access to locations and getting to those locations as well. So every single donation, no matter how small or big, really helps. So thanks very much and see you in the next episode.